My name's Zoe, and the first thing I remember after the accident was the sound.
Beep, beep, beep. Slow.
Mechanical. Unforgiving. When I opened my eyes, everything was white. The ceiling, the lights, the walls, even the sheets wrapped tightly around my body. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then the pain hit.
Sharp. Crushing.
Everywhere. My chest burned every time I breathed. My left leg felt like it didn't belong to me. When I tried to move, a wave of agony shot through my body and forced a broken gasp from my lips. A nurse rushed over.
Easy.
You're safe.
Safe.
That word felt strange. I didn't feel safe. I felt alone. The doctor later explained it calmly, like he was reading off a grocery list. 3 broken ribs. A fractured femur. Minor head trauma. You're lucky, he said. Lucky. A delivery truck had run a red light during a storm. My small car never stood a chance. I didn't even remember the impact. Just rain on the windshield. Then darkness. The first night was the worst. Hospitals are loud during the day, footsteps, rolling carts, distant conversations. But at night, they become painfully quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. No one sat beside my bed. No flowers. No get-well-soon balloons. My mom would have been there. She would have held my hand and told me I was strong. She would have brushed my hair back from my forehead and whispered prayers like she used to when I was little. But my mom had been gone for 3 years. Cancer doesn't care about fairness. And my father? He left long before that. Another story. Another silence. The only person who visited was a social worker with tired eyes and a clipboard. She asked polite questions, took notes, promised to check in. After she left, the room felt bigger. Empty. There was one person who never came. Not when my mom got sick. Not when she died. Not when I graduated middle school, with no one in the audience. My grandfather. The wealthy one. The billionaire who owned skyscrapers and luxury resorts. The man whose name appeared in business magazines and charity galas. The man who had cut my mother off when she chose love over money. He had disowned her, which meant he had disowned me. So when I lay there staring at the ceiling on my 3rd night in the hospital, I never imagined that the next time the door opened, my entire life was about to change. It was 7:43 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had been staring at the digital clock across the room for almost an hour. The seconds blinked forward slowly, like they were dragging the night out just to test my patience. The door clicked open. I expected a nurse coming to check my vitals. Instead, the air in the room changed. Heavy. Controlled. When I turned my head, my breath caught in my throat. He stood there like he didn't belong in a hospital room, like the sterile white walls were beneath him.
Tall.
Perfect posture. Tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Silver hair combed neatly back. His face sharp, expression unreadable. On his wrist, a watch that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I had seen that face before. Not in person. In magazines. On financial news channels. On the cover of a Forbes article once. My grandfather. 2 men in dark suits stood outside the door. Security. Of course. He stepped inside without hesitation. His polished shoes made almost no sound against the floor. The nurse, who had been adjusting my froze mid-motion. Sir, visiting hours. I own half this hospital, he said calmly, not raising his voice. The nurse went silent. He approached my bed and studied me the way someone examines a damaged investment. His eyes scanned the cast on my leg, the bruises on my face, the machines hooked to my body. There was no softness in his expression. No visible emotion at all. My heart started racing, and not just because of the monitors. He hadn't come to my mother's funeral. He hadn't sent a birthday card. He hadn't acknowledged my existence in years. And now he was standing at my hospital bed.
Why?
Finally, he spoke. Get ready to leave. His voice was deep, controlled, commanding. I blinked at him. What? You're not staying here. My mind struggled to catch up. I can't just leave. I'm still recovering. That won't be a problem. He turned toward the nurse like I wasn't even part of the conversation. Arrange a transfer to the private wing. Immediately. The nurse hesitated. Sir, insurance approval. Send the bill to me. Silence. Everything happened fast after that. Calls were made. Papers were signed. Doctors appeared like summoned assistants. I lay there, confused and overwhelmed, watching my life shift without my permission. When the room finally emptied, and it was just the two of us, he looked at me for a long moment. You shouldn't be here alone, he said. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't cold either. And for the first time since the accident, I felt something other than pain. I felt uncertainty, because the man who had erased us from his life had just walked back into mine.
And he wasn't asking.
He was taking control. The transfer happened so quickly it felt unreal. Within an hour, nurses were carefully disconnecting machines, adjusting 4 lines, and rolling my hospital bed down quiet hallways I hadn't even known existed. The regular ward faded behind me, the harsh fluorescent lights, the thin curtains, the echo of distant coughs. We entered a different section of the hospital. Everything changed. The lighting was warm instead of clinical. The floors were polished marble. There were framed paintings on the walls instead of medical charts. Even the air smelled different, faintly like lavender instead of disinfectant. When they wheeled me into the new room, I thought they had made a mistake. This wasn't a hospital room. It was a suite. There was a couch near the window, a flat-screen TV mounted across from the bed, real wooden furniture instead of metal rails. Fresh white lilies sat in a crystal vase on the side table. I felt like I had crossed into someone else's life. My grandfather stood near the large window, hands clasped behind his back, overlooking the city, lights below. He looked completely at home here, like this level of comfort was his natural habitat. Doctors surrounded him, explaining my condition in careful, respectful tones. She'll need at least 6 weeks before full mobility, one said. Physical therapy will be essential. We'll bring in a specialist. My grandfather nodded once. Spare no expense. 3 simple words. The same man who had refused to pay for my mother's treatments years ago was now saying that for me. The contradiction made my chest tighten. After the doctors left, the room grew quiet. A private nurse adjusted my pillows gently and gave me a reassuring smile before stepping out. Then it was just us. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. You'll recover faster here, he said. I swallowed. Why are you doing this? The question hung between us. He turned from the window slowly and faced me fully for the first time. Up close, I could see faint lines around his eyes. Not weakness, just time. You're my granddaughter. The words felt foreign. You didn't seem to remember that before, I said quietly. His jaw tightened slightly. That was complicated. Complicated. That word felt too small for years of silence. He stepped closer to the bed, studying me more carefully now, not like an asset, but like something fragile. You won't be alone again, he said. It wasn't warm. It wasn't emotional. But it wasn't distant either. It sounded like a decision. And somehow, that felt even more powerful. As I lay there in the soft hospital suite, surrounded by luxury that didn't belong to me, one thought kept circling in my mind. This wasn't just about moving rooms. This was about moving into a different life. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. The next evening, he came alone. No security. No assistance. No doctors trailing behind him. Just him. He was holding something under his arm. A thin, worn leather folder that looked older than anything else he owned. I watched him as he walked toward my bed. He didn't speak immediately. He pulled a chair closer and sat down beside me for the first time since arriving. It felt different. Less like a takeover. More like a conversation. Without a word, he placed the folder on the small table beside my bed and opened it carefully, almost cautiously. Inside were photographs. Old ones. Printed. Slightly faded at the edges. My breath caught when I saw her. My mom. Young. Smiling. Her dark hair blowing in the wind. In one photo, she was sitting on the hood of a car, laughing at something off camera. In another, she was standing beside a tall building, one of his buildings. And then I saw the last photo. She was pregnant. Her hands rested gently over her stomach. Over me. My fingers trembled as I touched the image. "Where did you get these?" I whispered. "I kept them," he said quietly. That surprised me. "You said she chose wrong," I said, my voice barely steady. "You cut her off when she married my dad." His eyes hardened, but not at me. "At him," he said. "Not at her. You still let her go." Silence filled the room. He leaned back slightly, staring at the photos as if they belonged to someone else's story. "I thought I was protecting her," he said finally. "I built everything from nothing. I believed stability was love. Security was love." He exhaled slowly. "She chose passion instead. And you punished her for it." He didn't deny it. His fingers tightened slightly against the armrest. I was angry,
Proud.
stubborn. His jaw flexed. By the time I realized I was wrong, too much time had passed. My chest tightened painfully, and not because of my ribs. "She got sick," I said softly. "We couldn't afford the best treatments." His eyes closed briefly. "I know. You knew." He nodded once. "I tried to send money anonymously. She returned it." That hit me like a shock. "She never told me."
She wouldn't, he said.
"She was as proud as I am." The room felt heavier. All those years of resentment. All that silence. All that distance. Built on pride. "I didn't come to her funeral," he said, his voice lower now. "And that will be my greatest regret." For the first time since he entered my life again, I saw something crack in him. Not weakness.
Guilt.
Real, heavy guilt. He looked at me then not like a businessman, not like a patriarch, but like a father who had lost his daughter. "I won't make the same mistake twice," he said. And for the first time, I believed him. For a few days after that conversation, things felt softer. He visited in the evenings. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. But the silence between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was thoughtful. Still, something felt unfinished. Like he hadn't told me everything. I found out the truth by accident. I had been trying to sleep when I heard voices outside my door. The private wing was usually quiet, but this time the tone was different. Urgent.
Low.
I recognized one voice instantly. My grandfather. "We don't have much time," a doctor was saying. "How long?" my grandfather asked calmly. "A year, maybe less without surgery. The condition is progressing faster than expected." My heart stopped. I held my breath so they wouldn't hear me moving. "There are risks," the doctor continued. "At your age. Open heart surgery. I understand the risks." Silence. Then my grandfather's voice again, steady, controlled, but with something underneath it. "Schedule it." Footsteps moved away. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. The next evening, when he walked into my room like nothing had changed, I didn't pretend. "You're sick," I said. He stopped mid-step. So he knew I knew. After a moment, he pulled a chair closer and sat down. "It's manageable," he said. That's not what the doctor said. A faint smile touched his lips. "You were always observant. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want this to be about me." I felt anger rise in my chest. "Then what is it about?" He looked at me carefully, studying my expression. "It's about what happens after." The words hung in the air.
After.
"If something goes wrong during surgery," he continued calmly, "everything transfers to you." My pulse pounded in my ears. Everything. His companies. His properties.
His investments.
The empire he had built over decades. "You're the only direct heir left," he said. "The board knows it. The lawyers know it." I stared at him. "So, this is why you came? To prepare me?" "That's part of it. Part of it." His eyes softened slightly. "I came because I ran out of time to fix my mistakes." The anger inside me wavered. "And if the surgery fails?" I asked quietly. "Then you'll need to be stronger than they expect."
They.
The board. The shareholders. The vultures. For the first time, I saw something protective in his expression. "They won't see you as my granddaughter," he said. They'll see you as an obstacle. My chest tightened. I wasn't just healing from an accident. I was being pulled into a war I never asked for. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. He didn't just rescue me from a hospital bed. He was positioning me on a battlefield. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to fight. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. The hospital doors slid open, and sunlight hit my face for the first time since the accident. It felt unreal, like I had been underwater and was finally breathing again. A sleek black SUV waited at the curb. Not just one. 3. My grandfather stood beside the first one, hands clasped behind his back, looking more like a CEO attending a press conference than a man picking up his granddaughter from the hospital. The driver opened the door carefully, helping me into the back seat. My leg was still in a brace, my movements slow and careful. But inside the car, everything was silent and smooth. No bumps. No chaos. Just controlled luxury. As we drove, the city faded behind us. Skyscrapers turned into coastal highways. Concrete became ocean. And then I saw it. The mansion. It sat on a cliff overlooking the sea, all glass and stone, modern and intimidating. The kind of place you see in architecture magazines. The kind of place that doesn't feel real. The gates opened automatically. Staff lined the entrance as the SUV pulled in. Staff.
For me.
The doors opened, and warm ocean air brushed against my face. I stepped out slowly, leaning slightly on the crutch the doctor insisted I use. "This is your home now," my grandfather said. Home. The word felt too big. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors. High ceilings. Art pieces that probably cost more than my old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the endless ocean below. It was breathtaking. And lonely. I could hear my footsteps echo as we walked down the hallway. He showed me my room. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a suite. Soft gray walls. A balcony overlooking the water. A walk-in closet bigger than my old bedroom. Fresh flowers placed carefully on the nightstand. "I had it prepared," he said simply. "For how long?" I asked. "A few days."
So he had planned this.
He turned toward me. "You start lessons tomorrow." I blinked. Lessons. Business. Finance. Corporate law. You need to understand what you'll be responsible for. I stared at him. I just got out of the hospital. "You're healing," he said calmly. "Not helpless." That hit differently. "You think I can handle this?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yes. No doubt. No hesitation. Just certainty. As he walked toward the door, he paused. "You're stronger than you realize, Zoe." Then he left me alone in a room bigger than my entire past life. I stepped onto the balcony carefully and looked at the crashing waves below. The hospital had been white and empty. This place was grand and powerful. But inside me, everything still felt uncertain. Because I wasn't just recovering from broken bones anymore. I was stepping into an empire. And empires don't come without consequences. The lessons began at exactly 8 a.m. No flexibility. No excuses. At 7:55, I was seated at a long glass table in a private study overlooking the ocean. My leg was still healing, but the brace had been replaced with structured physical therapy sessions in the afternoons. Pain was no longer my biggest challenge. Information was. My first tutor was a corporate attorney with sharp eyes and sharper questions. "Do you know what fiduciary responsibility means?" she asked. I shook my head. "By the end of this month, you will." That became the pattern of my days. Mornings, corporate structure, mergers, shareholder voting power. Afternoons, financial statements, profit margins, investment strategy. Evenings, reviewing contracts and watching recordings of past board meetings. At first, it felt overwhelming, like being dropped into deep water and told to swim. But something surprising happened. I didn't drown. I listened carefully, took notes, asked questions. I began to see patterns, how decisions shaped outcomes, how power shifted in quiet ways, how confidence alone could control a room. One afternoon, my grandfather invited me to sit in on a real executive meeting via video conference. I sat quietly at the end of the long table in his office. The board members appeared on the large screen, older men and women with polished voices and expensive suits. They spoke with authority, with certainty. And then one of them glanced toward me. "And who is she?" he asked casually. "My granddaughter," my grandfather replied. There was a pause.
Oh,
The air. The tone changed instantly. Polite. Controlled. Assessing. I felt their eyes measuring me through the screen. Too young. Too quiet. Too inexperienced. I remembered the hospital bed. The silence. The loneliness. I wasn't that girl anymore. Halfway through the meeting, they discussed a struggling division, declining profits, poor marketing strategy. Without thinking too much, I spoke. "Why are you targeting the same demographic every quarter?" I asked. "The data shows engagement dropping. Maybe it's not the product. Maybe it's the positioning." The room went still. My grandfather turned his head slightly toward me, surprised. One board member frowned. "And what would you suggest?" My heart pounded, but I didn't back down. "Shift the narrative. Market the lifestyle, not the product. Build aspiration, not just affordability." Silence. Then another board member nodded slowly. "That's actually interesting." The conversation shifted. Ideas evolved. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. After the meeting ended, my grandfather closed his laptop and looked at me. "You surprised them," he said. "I surprised myself," I admitted. A faint smile appeared on his face, subtle, but real. "You're learning faster than I expected." I met his eyes. "You said I was strong." He nodded once. I was right. That night, standing on the balcony again, watching the waves crash below, I realized something important. This world wasn't rejecting me.
it was testing me.
And for the first time, I was ready to prove I belonged. The lessons began at exactly 8 a.m. No flexibility. No excuses. At 7:55, I was seated at a long glass table in a private study overlooking the ocean. My leg was still healing, but the brace had been replaced with structured physical therapy sessions in the afternoons. Pain was no longer my biggest challenge. Information was. My first tutor was a corporate attorney with sharp eyes and sharper questions. "Do you know what fiduciary responsibility means?" she asked. I shook my head. "By the end of this month, you will." That became the pattern of my days. Mornings, corporate structure, mergers, shareholder voting power. Afternoons, financial statements, profit margins, investment strategy. Evenings, reviewing contracts and watching recordings of past board meetings. At first, it felt overwhelming, like being dropped into deep water and told to swim. But something surprising happened. I didn't drown. I listened carefully, took notes, asked questions. I began to see patterns, how decisions shaped outcomes, how power shifted in quiet ways, how confidence alone could control a room. One afternoon, my grandfather invited me to sit in on a real executive meeting via video conference. I sat quietly at the end of the long table in his office. The board members appeared on the large screen, older men and women with polished voices and expensive suits. They spoke with authority, with certainty. And then one of them glanced toward me. "And who is she?" he asked casually. "My granddaughter," my grandfather replied. There was a pause.
Oh,
The air. The tone changed instantly. Polite. Controlled. Assessing. I felt their eyes measuring me through the screen. Too young. Too quiet. Too inexperienced. I remembered the hospital bed. The silence. The loneliness. I wasn't that girl anymore. Halfway through the meeting, they discussed a struggling division, declining profits, poor marketing strategy. Without thinking too much, I spoke. "Why are you targeting the same demographic every quarter?" I asked. "The data shows engagement dropping. Maybe it's not the product. Maybe it's the positioning." The room went still. My grandfather turned his head slightly toward me, surprised. One board member frowned. "And what would you suggest?" My heart pounded, but I didn't back down. "Shift the narrative. Market the lifestyle, not the product. Build aspiration, not just affordability." Silence. Then another board member nodded slowly. That's actually interesting. The conversation shifted. Ideas evolved. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. After the meeting ended, my grandfather closed his laptop and looked at me. You surprised them, he said. I surprised myself, I admitted. A faint smile appeared on his face, subtle, but real. You're learning faster than I expected. I met his eyes. You said I was strong. He nodded once. I was right. That night, standing on the balcony again, watching the waves crash below, I realized something important. This world wasn't rejecting me. It was testing me. And for the first time, I was ready to prove I belonged. Recovery was slow. My grandfather remained in a private recovery suite, doctors monitoring him closely. He was conscious, stable, but weak. The powerful presence that once filled every room was temporarily replaced by quiet rest. And that's when they moved. The board. The first email arrived 3 days after the surgery. Emergency shareholder meeting. The wording was polite, professional, but I could read between the lines. They thought he wouldn't return to full control. They thought this was their opportunity. I attended the meeting alone. Not because I had to, because I chose to. The boardroom felt colder than the hospital ever had. Long polished table. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Men and women in expensive suits sitting with composed expressions. They all stood when I entered. Not out of respect. Out of protocol. Miss Zoe, one of the senior board members, greeted smoothly. We hope your grandfather is recovering well. He is, I replied calmly. I took the seat at the head of the table. His seat. There was a subtle shift in the room. The meeting began. They discussed temporary restructuring, protective oversight, strategic interim leadership. It all sounded responsible, until I realized what they were actually proposing. They wanted to remove his executive authority during recovery and place the company under a collective leadership committee. The same committee made up of them. You're young, one board member said carefully. We understand this is overwhelming. Overwhelming. I folded my hands on the table. Is it? I asked calmly. They exchanged small glances. We're simply protecting the company. From what? I asked. Instability. I leaned back slightly. You posted record profits last quarter, I said. Debt ratio decreased by 12%. Expansion contracts in Singapore and Dubai are pending final approval. Where is the instability? Silence. Their eyes flickered. They hadn't expected me to know the numbers. One of them cleared his throat. With respect, experience matters. Yes, I agreed. It does. I leaned forward. And experience should also know that shareholders lose confidence when leadership appears divided. The room went still. You call an emergency meeting while the CEO is in recovery. That doesn't signal stability. It signals panic. Their composure shifted. Just slightly. And panic, I continued, affects stock value. That landed. Hard. I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't emotional. I was controlled. Measured. Strategic. Exactly like him. After a tense pause, one board member nodded slowly. Perhaps we postpone any restructuring discussions. Perhaps, I agreed. The meeting adjourned shortly after. As I walked out of the boardroom, my pulse pounded, but my steps were steady. They had tried to test me, to intimidate me, to quietly remove me from the equation. Instead, I made one thing clear. I wasn't just the granddaughter. I was watching, and I understood the game. When I returned to the hospital that evening, I stood beside his bed again. You were right, I whispered softly. They smiled while calculating, but so could I. And this time, I wasn't the girl in the hospital bed. I was the one holding the line. 3 months later, he was home. The mansion felt alive again, not because of the staff, not because of the power, but because he was walking through it on his own. Slower than before, but stronger. Recovery had changed him. The sharp edge was still there, the intelligence, the authority, but there was something else now. Perspective. We sat together on the balcony one evening, the sky painted in soft orange and violet as the sun dipped into the ocean. The waves crashed against the cliff below, steady and endless. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, he broke the silence. I read the board meeting transcript. I smiled slightly. Of course you did. You handled it well. You taught me. He shook his head gently. I gave you information. You chose how to use it. That meant more than praise. It meant respect. The wind lifted strands of my hair as I looked out at the horizon. I used to think money solved everything, I admitted quietly. That if Mom had more of it, she would still be here. He didn't interrupt. But now I see something different. I continued. Money gives power. Power gives choices. But it doesn't fix pride. Or regret. He exhaled slowly. You understand more than most adults I've met. I turned toward him. Why did you really come to the hospital? He didn't answer immediately. Because this time, he wasn't calculating. He was choosing honesty. I walked into that room, he said finally, and I saw her. My chest tightened. You have her eyes, he continued. And I realized I had already lost too much time. The air felt heavier, but not in a painful way. In a truthful way. I thought I was coming to protect my legacy, he said. But I was wrong. What were you protecting? I asked softly.
He looked at me.
You. That word settled deep inside me. For years, I believed I wasn't wanted. Not by my father. Not by him.
But now?
Now I understood something powerful. He didn't just show up to transfer wealth. He showed up to fix what he broke. You know, he said after a moment, I built this empire from nothing. I looked around at the glass walls, the endless ocean, the world beneath us. And what matters most, he continued quietly, is not losing the people you built it for. I reached for his hand. This time it wasn't fear holding it. It was connection. I thought I inherited billions. Skyscrapers. Contracts. Power. But that wasn't the real inheritance. The real inheritance was strength. Forgiveness. And the courage to show up before it's too late. He showed up at my hospital bed.
And he didn't just take me out of that room.
He gave me back a family I thought I'd lost. And this time, neither of us was leaving.
Dizzy.